Dr. Oliver Bennett stared at the thick folder that had just been dropped on his desk. The manila envelope bore the official seal of the British Film Institute, something he hadn't expected to see on a Tuesday morning. Rain tapped against his office window at Cambridge University, where he'd spent the last 15 years debunking paranormal claims and urban legends. "Another waste of time," he muttered, opening the folder. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. Photographs spilled onto his desk, strange lights floating through empty film sets, blurry figures in what looked like old spacesuits, and equipment readings that made no sense. The phone on his desk rang. "Dr. Bennett speaking," he answered, still studying the photos. "Have you received our package?" The voice belonged to Thomas Hartford, head of the British Film Institute's Historical Preservation Department. "We need your expertise on this matter." Oliver picked up one of the photos, holding it closer to the light. Why would the Film Institute need a paranormal investigator? Surely this is just clever photography. "We thought so too, at first," Thomas replied. "But these incidents at Blackwood Studios have been happening since 1985. The last film shot there was never completed. We've had 3 different investigation teams try to explain it. None of them could." A knock at the office door interrupted them. Emma Whitmore, Oliver's research assistant, walked in carrying her laptop. Her red hair was damp from the rain, and she looked excited about something. Oliver held up a finger, asking her to wait. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Oliver asked into the phone. "We need someone with your background in both scientific analysis and historical investigation. The studio is being considered for historical preservation status, but we need to address these claims first. Your reputation for finding rational explanations is exactly what we need." Emma was practically bouncing with impatience. Oliver sighed. "Send me the details. I'll look into it." He hung up and turned to Emma. "What's got you so worked up?" "You won't believe what I found about Blackwood Studios," she said, opening her laptop. "I've been researching old film studios all morning for that other project, and—" She stopped, noticing the photos on his desk. "Wait, are those from Blackwood?" Oliver nodded. "The British Film Institute just hired us to investigate some supposed haunting there." "How did you know about it?" Emma turned her laptop around. On the screen was an old newspaper article from 1985. "STLR-VOIAGER Productivation HALTET. 3 CRU members missing." Below it was a black and white photo of the film's director, James Blackwood, standing next to some impressive-looking spaceship props. "The studio was making this big science fiction film," Emma explained. "They were saying it would have the most realistic space scenes ever filmed. But then people started disappearing, equipment went missing, and they found weird readings all over the studio. The production shut down, and the studio's been empty ever since." Oliver picked up another photo from the folder. This one showed a strange device in what looked like a basement room. It was clearly machine-like, but its design was unlike anything he'd seen before. "Pack your bags," he told Emma. "We're going to Blackwood Studios. But remember, there's always a rational explanation. Always." Emma gathered her things, trying to hide her excitement. "Of course, sir. Pure scientific investigation." As they prepared to leave, Oliver glanced at the final photo in the folder. It showed a figure in what appeared to be a spacesuit, but something was off about it. The suit's design looked too advanced, too sleek for 1985. And according to the photo's timestamp, it had been taken just last week. "Interesting," he mumbled, slipping the photo into his briefcase. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely intrigued by a case. Whatever was happening at Blackwood Studios, it wasn't a simple ghost story. And Dr. Oliver Bennett was going to find out exactly what it was. The gates of Blackwood Studios creaked open for the first time in decades. Oliver's old Land Rover crunched over fallen leaves as they drove into the property. Dark buildings loomed ahead, their windows like empty eyes staring down at the newcomers. "The security office should be in the main building," Emma said, checking her tablet. She had downloaded the studio's original floor plans during their drive. If there's any working cameras left, we can access them from there. Oliver parked near the main entrance. The building's Art Deco style spoke of better days, when this had been one of Britain's finest film studios. Now moss grew between the bricks, and ivy crawled up the walls. "Check for signs of trespassing first," Oliver told Emma as they got out. "Most haunted places attract teenagers looking for thrills." But as they walked around the building, something seemed off. There were no broken windows, no graffiti, no empty beer cans or other signs of visitors. The place looked abandoned, yes, but also strangely well preserved. Inside, their flashlights revealed a lobby frozen in time. A layer of dust covered everything, but underneath, old movie posters still hung on the walls. A giant Stellar Voyager poster showed a spaceship that looked surprisingly modern for 1985. They found the security office easily enough. Oliver expected to find old monitoring equipment, the kind used in the 1980s. Instead, they discovered sleek black boxes with smooth panels that looked far too advanced. "This can't be right," Emma said, running her hand over one of the panels. It lit up at her touch, displaying crystal-clear images from cameras around the studio. "This is modern equipment. Better than modern, actually. I've never seen interfaces like this." Oliver frowned. "Someone's been here. Recently." He pointed to a corner of the room where the dust had been disturbed. "Look at the floor. Multiple footprints, but they all disappear at this wall." Emma played back the security footage. Most of it showed empty rooms and hallways, but then something strange appeared. A figure in what looked like a spacesuit walked through one of the sound stages. The suit glowed faintly, and the figure seemed to flicker, like a bad television signal. "Wait," Oliver said. "Go back." Emma rewound the footage. There, freeze it. The space-suited figure had turned toward the camera. Its helmet design was like nothing they'd ever seen. It seemed to be made of one smooth piece of material, with no visible seams or joints. A noise from outside made them both jump. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, then stopped right outside the security office. Oliver and Emma held their breath. The doorknob turned slowly. An old man stepped in, looking unsurprised to see them. "Ah, Dr. Bennett. Right on time." He smiled warmly. "I'm Robert Fletcher, the local historian. The Film Institute said you'd be coming." Oliver relaxed slightly, but kept watching the old man carefully. "Mr. Fletcher, what can you tell us about this security system? It's not from 1985. Robert's smile faded a bit. "No, it's not. It was installed by the last film crew. They had all sorts of special equipment, very secretive about it too." He walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. 3 crew members disappeared during filming. The police investigation found nothing, but I've kept records of everything strange that's happened here since then. Emma took the folder and began reading. Her eyes widened. "Dr. Bennett, look at this. The missing crew members. They all worked in the special effects department, and the day before each disappearance, the studio's power usage spiked to impossible levels." Oliver was about to respond when all the screens in the security office suddenly went dark. Then they came back on, showing the same space-suited figure, now in multiple locations throughout the studio, and all of them were heading toward the security office. Robert Fletcher's face went pale. "It's happening again," he whispered, "just like in '85. Oliver, Emma, and Robert didn't stay to meet the approaching space-suited figures. They rushed out of the security office and hurried through the dark hallways of Blackwood Studios. The emergency exit led them to the parking lot where their Land Rover waited. "My house," Robert said, catching his breath. "It's safe there. And there's someone you need to meet." 20 minutes later, they sat in Robert's cozy living room. A white-haired woman in her 70s poured them tea with shaking hands. Her name was Margaret Penrose, and she had been the costume designer for Stellar Voyager in 1985. "I've waited years for someone to ask the right questions," Margaret said, settling into an armchair. Pictures of old movie sets decorated her walls. Everyone thought we were making things up, or that the disappearances were just publicity stunts. Oliver took out his notebook. "Tell us about James Blackwood, the director. What was he like near the end?" Margaret's eyes grew distant. James was brilliant, but obsessed. He wanted to make the most realistic space film ever. Said it would change how people saw the universe. She sipped her tea. Then these consultants showed up. Consultants. Emma leaned forward, recording the conversation on her phone. They came at night, always at night. Brought the most amazing special effects equipment I'd ever seen. But they never let anyone examine it closely. Margaret put down her teacup. James spent hours talking with them. He started acting strange after that. Kept talking about perfect realism and showing people the truth. Robert pulled out some old photographs and spread them on the coffee table. They showed the film set with strange lighting equipment and what looked like a real spaceship, not a movie prop. The space suits were odd too, Margaret continued. I was the costume designer, but I never made those suits. The consultants brought them. Said they were prototypes we could use. They looked so real, like nothing I'd ever seen. When I touched them, they felt wrong. Like they were made of something that shouldn't exist. Oliver picked up one of the photos. Did you ever see the consultants clearly? Margaret shook her head. They wore dark clothes and kept to the shadows. But sometimes, when they moved, she hesitated. Sometimes they seemed to flicker, like they weren't quite solid. Like the figures we saw on the security cameras, Emma whispered. The day before the first disappearance, Margaret said, I overheard James arguing with them. He was shouting about something called temporal guidelines and contamination risks. The next morning, our best special effects artist was gone. A week later, 2 more vanished. Oliver studied Margaret carefully. What do you think happened to them? Tears filled Margaret's eyes. The night of the 3rd disappearance, I stayed late. I saw. She took a deep breath. I saw one of the consultants leading our crew member toward a light. They both flickered like bad TV reception. And then they were gone. Just gone. When I told the police, they thought I was crazy or covering up something worse. Emma showed Margaret the security footage from earlier that day. Are these the same kinds of suits you saw back then? Margaret's face went white. Yes, exactly the same. They haven't aged a day. She grabbed Oliver's arm. You have to understand. Those aren't costumes. Those suits, that equipment, they're real. The consultants weren't helping us make a movie. They were using our film as cover for something else. Suddenly, all the lights in Robert's house flickered. The TV turned on by itself, showing only static. A high-pitched hum filled the air. They're coming, Margaret whispered, terror in her voice. They always know when someone gets too close to the truth. Through the living room window, they saw a familiar glow approaching from the direction of the studio. The same glow they'd seen in all the photos, and with it came the flickering figures in their impossible spacesuits. Oliver stood up. Everyone to the basement. Now, we need to figure out what we're really dealing with, and I have a feeling we're running out of time. The basement of Robert's house was cold and dark. Emma's phone had stopped working, showing only static on its screen. The humming sound from above grew louder, then suddenly stopped. They're testing the area, Margaret whispered. Looking for something. They always are. Oliver pulled out an old map of Blackwood Studios from his briefcase. Margaret, you said the consultants brought special equipment. Where did they keep it? Sound Stage 3, she replied. The big one at the back of the studio. They turned the basement into their workshop. Nobody was allowed down there. Emma looked up from her tablet, which was working again. But the studio plans don't show any basement under Sound Stage 3. Exactly, Margaret said. It wasn't there before they came. After an hour, the humming stopped. Robert checked upstairs and found no sign of the strange figures. They drove back to the studio in tense silence. parking far from Sound Stage 3 to avoid being seen. The sound stage was huge, its metal walls rising into the dark sky. Inside, their flashlights showed dusty camera equipment and half-built spaceship sets. Everything looked normal until Oliver's light caught something odd in the floor. "Here," he said, kneeling down. His fingers found the edge of a trapdoor, hidden under what looked like solid concrete. "Emma, help me with this." Together, they lifted the heavy door. Steel stairs led down into darkness. The air that rose from below was strangely cold and smelled like ozone. "I never went down there," Margaret said, staying near the stairs. "But sometimes we heard noises, like machinery, but not like any machines I knew." Oliver led the way down. The basement was bigger than the soundstage above it, which should have been impossible. Their flashlights revealed walls covered in strange writing. It wasn't any language they recognized. The symbols seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. "Over here," Emma called. She stood in front of what looked like a giant metal ring, half buried in one wall. Parts of it glowed faintly with a blue light. "This isn't a movie prop." Oliver took readings with his equipment. The numbers made no sense. These energy patterns, they don't match anything known to science. They found more strange devices. Some looked broken, others seemed to be only half there, like they were fading in and out of existence. On a workbench lay what appeared to be the insides of one of the spacesuits they'd seen. The material wasn't cloth or metal. It moved slightly when touched, like it was alive. "Dr. Bennett," Emma said, her voice shaking. She held up a piece of paper covered in complex diagrams. "Look at the date on this." Oliver checked. "That's impossible. This paper is dated 3045. "There's more," Emma said, going through more documents. "These are maintenance logs for something called a temporal displacement system. And look at the elements listed in these materials. Half of them haven't been discovered yet. They're not on any periodic table." A loud clang made them all jump. Something had fallen in a dark corner of the room. Oliver's flashlight beam found a small metal cylinder rolling across the floor. It stopped, then began to glow. "Don't move," said a new voice from the shadows. "You've already seen too much." They turned to see a woman in modern clothes stepping out of what looked like thin air. She wore a badge they couldn't quite focus on, and held something that was definitely not a normal weapon. "My name is Alice Hawkins," she said. "I'm a temporal preservation agent, and you four have just stumbled into something much bigger than a haunted movie studio." The cylinder on the floor pulsed with light, and suddenly the whole room was filled with holographic displays showing timelines, star maps, and things none of them could understand. "I suppose," Alice sighed, "it's time to tell you what really happened here in 1985. And why we're still trying to fix it." Alice Hawkins waved her hand through one of the holographic displays, changing the images to show other movie studios around the world. Each one had a familiar glow around it in the pictures. "You're not the first to investigate these hauntings," she said, "but you're the first to get this close to the truth." Oliver watched as more images appeared. A studio in Hollywood with the same strange equipment. Another in Mumbai where people had vanished. A German film set where lights had been seen floating through walls. "All science fiction productions," Emma said, looking at the dates. "All in 1985. "Yes," Alice nodded. "That year was important. It was when humans first started making realistic movies about space travel. And we needed that cover." Margaret stepped forward. "We? Who are you people? What did you do with our missing crew members?" Alice's face softened. "Your friends are safe, Mrs. Penrose. They're actually living quite happy lives, about 1,000 years from now." The room fell silent. Robert dropped his notebook. Oliver just stared. "The consultants who came to your studio weren't from a special effects company," Alice continued. "They were temporal agents, like me. But they broke the rules. They got careless. They let people see too much." Emma pointed to the strange machinery around them. "This isn't from 1985, is it?" "No." Alice touched the metal ring in the wall. It hummed to life, showing strange patterns of light. This is recovery equipment. You see, humanity spreads to the stars eventually. We build amazing things, but sometimes pieces of our technology get lost in time. They fall through temporal cracks, ending up in the past where they don't belong. Oliver looked at the documents again. And you use movie studios as cover to find these lost pieces. Exactly, Alice smiled. We're better to hide advanced technology than in a place where people expect to see fake versions of it. If anyone spots something strange, they assume it's just a movie prop or special effect. She showed them more images, spacesuits that could bend time, engines that could fold space, machines that could talk to stars, all real technology, hidden in plain sight on movie sets around the world. But something went wrong here at Blackwood, Robert said. Didn't it? Alice's smile faded. Yes. The agents in 1985 found something big, something dangerous, a piece of technology so important that they broke protocol trying to recover it. They recruited help from the crew, showing them things they shouldn't have seen. The missing crew members, Margaret whispered. They went with them. They had to. Alice explained. Once they knew the truth, we couldn't leave them in 1985. It would have changed history too much, so we gave them a choice. They chose to come to the future. Oliver's scientific mind was racing. The other studios, Hollywood, Mumbai, Germany, they all had similar recoveries happening. All cover operations, Alice confirmed. We've been using film studios for centuries. Think about it. Every time you see a science fiction movie with impossibly good effects, with technology that seems too advanced, she smiled. Sometimes it is. Emma was typing quickly on her tablet. The pattern goes beyond 1985. I'm finding similar reports from other decades. The flying saucer craze in the 1950s, mostly leaked footage of our recovery ships. Alice nodded. The mysterious lights at horror movie shoots in the 1970s. Temporal scanners looking for lost tech. And now, Oliver said slowly, all those found footage horror films. The ones with strange lights and distorted camera effects. Modern cover operations. Alice finished. Though we're much better at staying hidden now. Usually. Suddenly, alarms started blaring from Alice's equipment. The holographic displays turned red. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. It's happening again. The thing they were looking for in 1985. It's still here. And it's waking up. The ground beneath Blackwood Studios began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling of the hidden basement as red warning lights flashed on Alice's equipment. What's waking up? Oliver asked, steadying himself against a wall. What did they find in 1985? Alice rushed to the metal ring in the wall, her fingers flying over hidden controls. They found a seed ship, a self-replicating exploration vessel from the year 4000. It crashed here in 1932, but the studio was built on top of it before anyone noticed. Emma's eyes widened. The whole studio was built on top of a spaceship. Not just any spaceship, Alice said, pulling up more holographic displays. This was one of the first ships humans sent to explore other galaxies. It could make copies of itself, learn from what it found, and send the data back through time. Margaret sat down heavily on a workbench. James knew, didn't he? That's why he was so obsessed with making everything look real. Alice nodded. We recruited him. He helped us search for the ship while pretending to make his movie. But he got too excited, too careless, started dropping hints in his script about real future technology. The shaking grew stronger. Through the holographic displays, they could see James Blackwood's personal logs appearing one by one. Oliver read them quickly. He was writing everything down, Oliver said. The ship, the future technology, the temporal agents. He was going to reveal it all in his movie, disguised as science fiction. That's why they had to shut down production, Alice explained. But by then, the ship had started to wake up. It detected our future technology and thought it was time to activate. Robert pointed to one of the displays. Look at these power readings. They matched the spikes from 1985, just before each disappearance. The ship was trying to send signals to the future, Alice said. Each time it activated, it created temporal disturbances. That's what caused the hauntings, echoes of future events bleeding backwards through time. A loud humming filled the room. The metal ring in the wall began to glow brighter, showing images of a massive structure buried deep beneath the studio. The ship is fully awake now, Alice said urgently. If it launches, it'll tear the studio apart and expose everything. We can't let that happen. The timeline would be destroyed. Emma studied the ship's readings. But if it's been down there since 1932, why is it waking up now? Because of us, Oliver realized. Our investigation, our equipment, all our scanning. We triggered something. The humming grew louder. Through the holograms, they could see the buried ship's systems coming online one by one. Its hull was bigger than the entire studio above it. James tried to stop it in 1985. Alice explained, working frantically at her controls. He and the temporal agents attempted to shut it down permanently, but they could only put it back to sleep. Now it's awake again, and it's stronger. Margaret stepped forward, her face determined. Show us his logs from that day. Maybe there's something we missed. Alice brought up the final entries. They watched as James Blackwood's words appeared before them. The ship responds to human thoughts and emotions. The agents say it was designed that way, to learn from its human creators. But that means it can be confused. We're going to try something dangerous. We'll feed it conflicting signals. Make it think it's both needed and not needed. Put it into a loop it can't resolve. That's it, Emma exclaimed. They turned the movie production itself into a signal, real and not real at the same time. That's why the ship went back to sleep. Oliver turned to Alice. Can we do it again? Use the same trick. More alarms blared. The ship was almost fully awake. Alice looked at her readings and made a quick decision. We can, she said, but we'll need help. Everyone gathered here, all our different perspectives and knowledge. It might be enough. If we work together, we might be able to put this ship back to sleep before it changes history forever. The buried ship's engines hummed louder beneath their feet. Through Alice's holographic displays, they could see its systems charging up, preparing to break free from the earth around it. We need to act fast, Alice said, pulling up more controls. The ship is designed to learn from human minds. In 1985, they confused it by making it think the movie was both real and fake at the same time. Oliver paced the room, thinking hard. So we need to do the same thing. But how? Emma looked at the old movie props around them. What if we finish the movie? Right now. Everyone turned to stare at her. She continued excitedly. Think about it. We have real future technology here, but we're using it to make a fake movie. That's exactly the kind of confusion that worked last time. Margaret's eyes lit up. Yes, and I know where all the original costumes and props are stored. The ones we actually made, not the future ones. It could work, Alice said, checking her readings. The ship is scanning for signs of advanced technology. If we mix real future tech with fake movie props. The floor shook harder. Cracks began appearing in the walls of the basement. They didn't have much time. Robert and Margaret ran upstairs to get the old movie props. Oliver and Emma helped Alice set up her future equipment around the soundstage. They worked quickly, setting up scenes that looked both real and fake at the same time. Here's the original script, Margaret called, running back in with a thick folder. The final scene was supposed to be about first contact with a future human civilization. Alice laughed. Now that's perfect. We can use my actual equipment to film a fake scene about future humans. They got to work. Margaret helped everyone into the original movie costumes. They looked cheap and fake compared to the real future technology around them. That was exactly what they needed. Remember, Alice said, checking her temporal readings. The ship is watching us through its sensors. We need to make this look like a real movie production, but use actual future tech at the same time. Oliver stood in front of the cameras wearing an old silver-painted spacesuit. Emma worked the lights, mixing regular stage lights with the glow of real future devices. Robert read lines from the script while real temporal energy swirled around them. The ship's humming changed tone. Alice checked her displays. "It's working," she shouted over the noise. "The ship is getting confused. It's detecting real future technology, but seeing it being used to make fake scenes. It can't tell what's real anymore." They filmed more scenes, mixing truth and fiction with every take. Margaret directed them using her memories of how James Blackwood had worked. The cheap props and costumes looked ridiculous next to Alice's advanced technology, creating exactly the confusion they needed. The ground stopped shaking. The humming began to fade. "The ship's systems are powering down," Alice said, watching her displays. "It's working just like in 1985. The confusion is making it go back to sleep." But suddenly, all of Alice's equipment flashed red. New alarms blared. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. The ship, it's not just going to sleep. It's changing its programming." "What does that mean?" Oliver asked, still wearing the fake spacesuit. "It means it's learning." Alice worked frantically at her controls. "The ship isn't just getting confused anymore. It's starting to understand what we're doing. It's adapting." The metal ring in the wall burst to life, showing new images. The ship wasn't shutting down. It was evolving. And as its programming changed, reality itself began to waver around them. "If we can't stop it now," Alice said, her voice shaking, "it won't just expose the truth about future technology. It's going to change the entire timeline. Everything we know, everything we are. It will all be different." Emma looked at the chaos around them and had one last idea. "What if that's not a bad thing?" she said slowly. "What if that's exactly what needs to happen?" John walked down the dark street. The night was cold and quiet. He pulled his coat tighter around him. His footsteps echoed off the buildings. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. He turned to look, but saw nothing. "Must be my imagination," he thought. He kept walking. A few minutes later, he heard it again. A shuffling sound like someone following him. He spun around quickly. In the dim light, he saw a shadowy figure duck into an alley. John's heart raced. He started walking faster. The figure emerged from the alley and followed, staying about a half a block behind. John broke into a run. The footsteps behind him got louder, closer. He ran as fast as he could. His pursuer was getting closer. John darted around a corner, hoping to lose them. But when he glanced back, the dark figure was still there, closing in. John frantically looked for somewhere to hide or get help. All the buildings were dark, closed for the night. He was alone on the empty street. The footsteps grew louder, pounding in his ears. The shadowy figure was almost upon him. In sheer desperation, John turned to confront his follower. "What do you want?" he yelled into the darkness. The figure slowly stepped forward into the dim light. When John saw who it was, his eyes went wide with shock and confusion. It couldn't be. It was impossible. "Hello, John," the man said in a familiar voice. "Did you miss me?" John staggered back in disbelief. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mind reeled, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of trick or illusion. Because the man standing in front of him was himself. That's all I have for part 8 of the story. The total word count so far is 306 words. Let me know if you would like me to continue with part 9, or if you have any other instructions.